We had a barn burner in the pre-tournament between Canada and USA. We'll talk about a lot more, including Connor Bedard and Trevor Zegras scoring a Michigan on the same night. All that's coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll start off by talking about the Canada-USA barn burner we had in the pre-tournament. It was a 6-5 overtime win for Lane Hutson and Team USA. We'll talk about how that went down, who scored, who didn't, who played well, who did not, and get into all of that in our first segment. In our second segment, we'll talk about some World Juniors over-agers that could get drafted in the 2024 NHL draft. Talk about a couple prospects who have lined themselves up for a good shot at the draft after being passed over last year or even maybe the year before. And then we'll end things off with Connor Bedard and Trevor Zegras scoring a Michigan on the same night, how that fares for the future of NHL offense, and also why is it that prospects are so good at doing this now when, this is a move you never saw in the NHL before, and now it seems like at least 5, 6, 7 times a year we see a player score a Michigan. So we'll get into all of that on today's show. Before I get into any of that, just remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started with Canada and USA, the 6-5 overtime win from USA. And who else to score the game winner in overtime than the short king himself, Lane Hutson, right?
Indeed, he played a pretty solid game of hockey from what I caught. I think I watched like a period and a half of the game, so I didn't catch the entire one as you did. But I really enjoyed watching this game. It was a lot closer and tighter and more like well fought than I was expecting going into the game because again that American lineup is just really impressive and outright dominant on the surface. So if Canada can play this style of hockey against the States during the tournament, it's going to be a lot closer than I expected, which is a great thing for everyone who loves competitive hockey. So it was definitely a very fun game, but you definitely saw the high skill players stand out and really show their flair. Like Will Smith had a tremendous assist. We saw Ryan Leonard really make his mark so far. And again, Lane Hutson was really the commanding presence from the blue line. The amount of stretch passes he hit like on target and of course his overtime winner were really nice. So very solid start to a tournament. So fingers crossed it keeps going like this.
Absolutely. And yeah, Lane Hutson for me was the star of this game, even though he was mainly playing third pair minutes because, it's a pre-tournament game and you don't want him to get injured too early. Within one of his first shifts, he just gets rid of Nate Danielson, who was pressuring him in the defensive zone, gets rid of him with a cutback, and then just opens up a passing lane that no one else saw. He just bombed the puck up the ice, tape to tape, onto Quinn Finley's stick for a breakaway and a goal. It was one of the best passes I've seen at the World Juniors. It was just, the accuracy, the amount of dexterity it takes to hit that lane, and just to see it alone. No one could see that coming. And yeah, that was his first goal. And then that was the first point he got. And then the second point he got was the overtime winner, where again, he got rid of Nate Danielson with a cutback. Skated it up the ice, lost the handle. Owen Beck got the puck, but then quickly got stripped by Lane Hutson. That was a hab-on-hab crime. And then Lane Hutson just walked in, kept the puck on his forehand, curled it, and shot it top corner. I like the way Lane Hutson uses his options as threats to keep space as accessible for him as possible. But beyond Lane Hutson, I thought Zeev Buium had a fantastic game. Again, I have yet to see a shift from Zeev Buium in this pre-tournament that I didn't like. He's so wriggly, and I think it's such a great skill to have, and it's hard to really describe. He's just wriggly, Like you try to pressure him, he'll just like walk through you. It's like he's covered in butter. It's ridiculous. And yeah, the whole defense overall, I think with USA is a really offensive minded defense. Even Eric Polkamp, I've seen a lot more offensive dare from him. I've seen a lot of really good flashes from him in terms of his hands, his ability to move through pressure. So like the defense is already offensive minded, and you add on top of that the ridiculous offensive lineup they have. Um, that game particularly, I thought the Smith Leonard Perot line carried a lot, along with Gavin Brindley and Frank Nazar. I think those two are pretty good, but I wasn't as impressed with the Cutter Gauthier, Jimmy Snuggerud. That line wasn't really all there. I think Oliver Moore was doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that line, but Cutter Gauthier did not impress me. Snuggerud had some good flashes, but it wasn't really going in for him like that. But yeah, I thought Cutter Gauthier especially had a really rough game in that one. He was putting everything on net, nothing was going in. He was getting frustrated. So it's like, yeah. But what's so impressive with USA is they have so many lines that can damage you, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. They don't need their top line to be on the ball every single game in order to be the favorites, which is
Yeah.
why it's such a high-end lineup. And of course, we're going to expect a bit more like of star-worthy performances from that top line as
Mhm.
the tournament progresses. But the fact that they didn't even need them to beat Canada uh, is definitely telling. And if those players come to play as the tournament continues, it's going to get all the more difficult for every other team that's going to be
Yeah,
present.
absolutely. But moving on to Canada, I thought Macklin Celebrini was honestly the best player for Team Canada at this game. Scored 2 goals. One should have been denied, and got denied another goal which shouldn't have been, which is weird. It's pre-tournament. It was really fun watching him just, quite honestly, like full kicking motion the puck into the net. And it's a pre-tournament, so no one really cares. But Jacob Fowler does, the goaltender for Team USA. He immediately was like, he immediately pointed to the ref, like, "Hey, that's a kicking motion." And it's like, someone tell this kid that it's a pre-tournament. Like I love him so much. Jacob Fowler is so competitive. But yeah, Celebrini scored that goal. Later on, he kind of did a shot pass which went off Seamus Casey's stick and into the top corner. And the third goal, the one that got denied, was a really just broken play. The puck kind of bounced in front of the net, and he kind of like tapped it with the bottom of his stick, but his stick was above the goal, the posts. Well, supposedly from the angle of where it was, like the impact was probably below it. But again, pre-tournament, no game reviews. It is what it is. But yeah, Salbrini was all over the place in this game. He was forechecking hard, recovering pucks, doing a lot of damage off the rush, as we know he can do. Um, and yeah, this could be a very, very good tournament for him. And especially, I mean, he probably should not have been playing in this game after what he did in the last one. Just
Yeah.
full on hit from behind on a player and for Switzerland. And yeah, that probably should have been a suspension, but they ended up not suspending him. And yeah, the upside of that is we got to see him against Team USA, but probably shouldn't have been, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. It was a pretty ugly hit. Like it was straight into the numbers and then head into the boards. Like it was
Yeah.
dangerous. It had every check mark that you look for, especially among like double IHF
Mhm.
suspensions and what they typically require to make a decision like that.
Yep.
If we're looking at the precedent, Celebrity definitely should have been suspended here, but he wouldn't be suspended for that play in the NHL probably. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
And
yeah.
even then, it's if some of those hits get suspended, some don't. I mean, it's a mess right now. The NHL teams running this from behind.
And they should be suspended. Like it was a
Yeah,
dangerous play that you should crack down on. But yeah, it's hockey. It's never quite black and white as much as they might say that it is.
yeah.
But you live and you learn. I'm sure Team Canada fans aren't overly disappointed by the verdict.
Hmm. Absolutely. Either way, I think also on defense, Denton Matejchuk had a fantastic game for Canada. I think that
For
was
sure.
like one big standout. And in goal, they switched out between Samuel Saint-Hilaire and Mathis Rousseau, both of the overage QMJHL goaltenders that were retained for this roster. And I really thought that Samuel Saint-Hilaire was a bit more stable, a bit more reliable in that. And I think between the two, we might just end up seeing Saint-Hilaire as the bona fide backup behind Scott Ratzlaff. But time will tell. I just really think that it would be really good to go with the hot hand. I didn't really like Mathis Rousseau's game too much. He seemed a bit unreliable at times. Was gifting up rebounds and, going into the corners for retrievals with a bit of hesitance. And some of the that was a lot more decisive, even though both of them allowed the same amount of goals. I thought that was a lot more decisive in that game, which for me is just, it's so important at the World Juniors to just not hesitate at all. Because like, it's going to be a tournament of bounces, right? So you need your goaltender to be, you know, if you're gonna make a mistake, make it with your chest. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that's what you'd rather see from a goaltender. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll talk about which World Juniors overagers could get drafted in the 2024 NHL draft. We'll talk about a hot name from Finland who's playing on the first pair. We'll talk about a couple of Canadian players, and a couple more right after these messages from our sponsors. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk about the World Juniors overagers that could get drafted in the 2024 NHL draft. We'll focus on overagers. So obviously all the draft eligibles, the Zeev Buyums, the Macklin Celebrinis, Constantine, like we know these guys. But I want to focus on some guys that aren't too well known, but could very well be drafted in the 2024 NHL draft, especially after the seasons they've been having so far, and especially if they have a really good World Juniors tournament. Scouts don't like to admit it, but this tournament counts for a lot, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I think with every scout, you get slight variances in just how much weight they put on it, and that is mainly philosophical. I think. Like, I think you put a bit more weight on it than I do personally. I look
Mhm.
at it as an opportunity to see them all on the same playing field and try to find links between what I'm seeing in their respective league tapes and in this one tournament where they're all present. But I know that you personally put a lot more weight into just like how important it is for players to take a step up in this tournament if they are draft eligible.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on a lot of factors, but I'd say the main two things I look for is first the ability to step things up when it matters the most, and this tournament matters. Every scout is there, and like that pressure, like the players know it, right? So I think this is an important tournament in order to see how players handle that pressure. Um, and also the other side of it, and why I think this tournament is important is that you get to see players at levels where they aren't too good or too bad for the level they're playing at. Like I'm excited to see Adam Yerchek at this tournament because Yerchek, he's punching above his head right now. Like he's not playing at a level where he's comfortable, and I think that leveling the playing field here is really important because it allows me to see what Adam Yerchek can do against his age group, which is really what matters at the end of the day. As much as it's great to see a player excelling against men, it's not always going to be the case. And oftentimes it's a case of players not being developed physically or, not being used to the style of play at the men's level and needing time to adapt to it, needing maturity. So I think Adam Yerchek specifically is a great case study for this because, yeah, like he's playing against men in Czechia is not comfortable at all and is kind of stuck at that level. So it's just like, what does he do against his own age group? And I think that can be taken into consideration. That can influence draft rankings because I think people look at the body of work at the league level and just kind of use that as a be all end all because there's a larger sample size. But larger sample size does not mean that like you're not going to get influenced by the score sheet or not. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of factors that can influence your decision negatively or positively, and I think one of the bigger ones is like a player just punching above his head and not being like comfortable at all at this level, and just kind of using that as a basis of like, okay, well, this player sucked this year, ergo he should be pushed down the rankings, whereas he's actually having like a good season and has actually improved some areas of his game, but you're not seeing it because like he's just way above his head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like to get into the names of this segment among overagers who perhaps weren't really standouts last year when they were draft eligible the first time around, but have really made their mark this season. There's quite a few like at this tournament that are quite interesting, and I think the one that's caught our eyes the most is Jesse Pulkkinen out of Finland, who's going to be first pair defenseman in all likelihood in this tournament
Yep.
despite only turning 19 once the tournament already kicks off, and being undrafted last year. But he is 6'6", which helps. I think
Yep.
that type of range when you're playing against your own age group is certainly an advantage. 207 pounds, but it's the production this season that is really taking a massive leap forward. So last year
Yeah.
in 40 U18 finish games, he put up 28 points. And this season in 18 U20 games, he's put up 28 points, which is a massive progression. And
Yep.
you've really seen him take a leap and trust his toolkit a lot more. Now, he's not a perfect player by any means. He still needs a lot of refining as far as lanky defensemen go. There's a reason he wasn't drafted last year. Like, there's definitely a lot of work left to do here for him to project as an NHLer. But
Yeah.
this tournament's going to be a great opportunity for him to kind of showcase his tools and really try to set his foot down and make sure that he does end up being drafted this year, which I think with that size, that production, and the World Junior minutes, it's going to be pretty much a slam dunk case that he's going to be an overager that is worthy of a draft pick, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, with Jesse Pulkkinen, what's so interesting is like, I think he has a really good shot of being drafted in the top 64. Like, he's been really, really good, and he's bound to catch scout size at this tournament. Like you said, he's going to be playing first pair minutes, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the things that scouts like, at least at the NHL level, that you get from Pulkin, and it's not just his size; it's the ability to close gaps, it's the physicality, it's the composure under pressure. Like, there have been some really good strides in this game in that area. But I think the same of Owen Allard, who's at a point a game pace with the Sioux Greyhounds so far in the OHL, and is one of the older players at this tournament. 6'2", 200 pounds, going to be playing bottom 6 minutes. But the goal he scored for Canada at the pre-tournament game against USA just showcases exactly why um, teams might like him. He's a clutch bottom sixer who's going to do the right things to put the puck in the net, which is like, you hear scouts talk at the NHL level, and that's like, this is exactly what they want. The goal he scored, he just stuffed the pad like 7 times, just outworked everyone down low in a pre-tournament game. Like, he has a point to prove, and he tries to do that every time. And yeah, I think a team will almost definitely take a look at Owen Allard at this tournament, and also his body of work in the Sioux, and also the bloodlines. I mean, he has a father and 2 brothers that play hockey and played fairly well. And they'll take a look at that entire kind of body of work and be like, yeah, well, we're gonna take a late round flyer on him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him drafted at all. Outside of that, for Canada, I think Samuel Saint-Hilaire or Mathis Rousseau could get drafted. I don't think both do, but one of them very well might. Of the 2 goaltenders, I think Saint-Hilaire is the most likely. Like I said, he was a lot more reliable in this pre-tournament, and I think he gets the cut. And if he gets into some games, especially if Scott Ratzlaff is having a couple stinkers, that kind of stuff, and he sees some more regular ice time and kind of takes the Team Canada net by storm, I think it's very likely that we see him get drafted. But there's another goaltender you push for on this list, Sam Hillebrand, right?
Yeah, I think he's interesting enough to kind of note here. He's not going to really get much playing time with the States with Trey Augustine and Jacob Fowler blocking the crease in
Yep.
front of him. But being the last invite among goaltenders is still a vote of confidence, and
Mhm.
he's one of very few undrafted players that the States invited to the tournament. And I think that while yeah, he's not going to exactly be showcased for a draft slot in
Yeah.
this tournament because of who's in front of him in the crease, I do think that he'll be worthy of a draft pick in the late rounds.
Oh, for sure. The other name would be Dominik Rymon for Czechia. I think that he's
Yeah.
bound to have a really good tournament. He's been really, really good in the WHL. He's well over a point a game, and yeah, I've noticed him a fair bit of times in the WHL. Haven't really focused too much on him because there's so many draft eligibles to focus on in the WHL. But every viewing I've gotten of him, he's just been dynamic. He's been active in the offensive zone. He's been kind of pushing the net. All the little details you like, and yeah, he's fairly likely to have a really good impact at this tournament and turn some heads. And I think, yeah, with a 6th, 7th round pick, you can do way, way worse than that. But yeah, that wraps things up for our second segment. Now we'll talk about a couple of Michigan goals scored on the same night. I think this is the first time ever that we had 2 Michigans on the
I
same
think
night
so.
in the NHL. I don't think, people say, oh, it'll never happen again. We'll talk about it, but I'm pretty sure this will happen again. We'll get into that after these messages from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's get right into it with our third segment. We'll talk about Connor Bedard and Trevor Zegras scoring a Michigan on the same night. They did it in different ways, which is very interesting. But overall, the Michigan is here to stay. I think this is going to be an unless the NHL like puts a ban on it, which would be very much an NHL move.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like this is a move that has worked so well. But let's focus first on how Bedard and Zegras did it differently. Talk me through that. We disagree already on which one's the better one, but let's just focus first on how they
Yes.
did it differently.
Okay, well, Trevor Zegras, who is already the master of Michigan in the NHL, of course, pulled another one, which has been the highest speed Michigan that we've seen at the NHL level by a decent margin,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken. It was really quick, really clean. You barely even noticed what happened before it was in the net.
Yep.
Whereas the Connor Bedard one, which is my personal favorite among these two, was on his backhand for his first ever Michigan goal in the NHL. So I was personally more impressed by that as a feat of individual performance than I was
Mhm.
by Trevor Zegras' goal. But that one they represented kind of like the continuation of this craft that you've seen this player like really consistently work on like through the years.
Yeah.
But with Bedard to be able to pull that off, I mean, what 30 games into his NHL career on the backhand is just like the style points are off the charts with it. I can't not pick it.
I get where you're coming from, but Trevor Zegras is like the way he did it was he did it with the toe of his stick on the move, full speed, full motion, and just it seemed like such a natural thing. And it was in like his first game back from injury. Like
Yeah.
that's how he announced his return, is he just toe picks the puck and just I don't know how else to describe. He just yeeted it in the back of the net. Like he did it with such aggression and force. It's like no goaltender was getting to that.
Yeah.
I personally prefer Zegras's just because like it's the first, like you said, the speed at which he did it, but also like I agree the backhand's difficult. I think the toe of your stick's even more difficult. Like he didn't do it with like the typical like scoop and carry. He picked it with the edge of the toe of his stick and
Yeah.
just threw it in the back of the net. Like you have so much less surface area to do that move, right? Like it's so tough. Like I can't vote
We're
against Zegers on
spoiled.
this.
We're spoiled for choice here. We get to choose our favorite Michigan of two Michigans that happen on the same night. Like,
Yeah,
what are we doing here? Wasting our time arguing. It's like
yeah.
CR7 versus Messi for the last like 20 years, where it's like, well, yeah, I think one is objectively better than the other, but can we just appreciate both?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the better one's Messi. So
Of course, yeah, agreed.
yeah. But yeah, let's focus on why this is so important for the NHL. I think that the Michigan is going to revolutionize the way teams play defense in the NHL. Like as more players, as more skilled players join the NHL and more young players are able to do this move in the offensive zone. Like this is the only move I can think of that makes the back of the net such a lethal scoring threat.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a playmaking threat. Like we've seen it forever with Wayne Gretzky. His
Gretzky's
ability.
office.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Like Wayne Gretzky made that the engine of the playmaking game in the offensive zone for the longest time. We know how you can use that as a passing opportunity, but like the Michigan makes it a goal scoring threat, which means that teams won't be able to just stay in front of the net and not follow players behind it. Teams won't be able to just sit back as a player circles the back of the net and just kind of block off passing options, because now the player can score from back there. So now you have to commit a player. You have to commit a defenseman that's going to be comfortable going behind the net and chasing the player so that they have less time, less space to pull off that move, right? And how does that change the offensive formation? What passing opportunities does that open? Like the thing with hockey tactics is it's like chess. You move one piece by one square, the entire game can shift. Like it opens up attacking opportunities that weren't there a second ago. And like yeah, I'm excited to see what the Michigan does long term for the NHL game. Um I know John Tortorella is listening to all of this and like actively losing hair, but I think this is fantastic for the game. I think this is fantastic for what it does to hockey tactics, and I'm so excited to see where this goes. And there are people saying online like, "Oh, we're never going to see this again." I think it's just a matter of time before we see like three Michigans a night. I think that's more likely than never seeing one again. Do you agree?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think as long as it's legal, which I mean, fingers crossed it stays because it's fun and
Yeah.
we have enough party pooping of fun in hockey
Oh yeah.
as
Just don't
is.
put
So,
Torts in charge, and we'll be fine.
but yeah, I think that we're going to be seeing more and more Michigans because every single like Canadian American hockey fan child in the world
Is
that
watching
is
this.
watching
Yeah.
players like Bedard and Zegras pull off these moves is going to go outside and spend the next 2 hours practicing the exact same maneuver on their net in their driveway, right? Like this is just how it goes. Like when I was growing up, right, it was like Crosby's, Ovechkins, Carey Prices of the world that were like the mainstay that you like pretended to be on the school playground
Yep.
and in gym class when you're playing whatever sport it is. But yeah, I think the Michigan is one of those like cult type of hockey moves that
Yeah.
you're going to see a lot of people practicing, and I don't think it's going anywhere, which it is delightful to me. I always really enjoy watching them, and if it can throw a wrench into the calm defensive systems that we've seen kind of evolve over the last like 10 years in the NHL,
Yeah.
and adding more skill and more overall chaos. I like chaos in hockey in general. It's fun. I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
as a scout, scouts love chaos. Coaches do not. That is where you
Yeah.
find a big difference. But I think as
Absolutely.
a scout, the Michigan gets a big thumbs up from me and makes hockey a lot more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we've seen an uptick in people in players being able to pull off this move is because we like this started with like Sidney Crosby in like 2003. Like
Yeah,
he did it. So then players in the mid to late 2000s like did like one or two a year. And then the more you go on, the more like that's how moves get popularized. That's how things become integral parts of the game. It's like the Patrick Kane, Evgeny Kuznetsov, like go behind the net and then like reverse it the other way. That was a rare move until everyone started doing it, and then it was like a
yeah.
a signature move for any good playmaker. I think the Michigan is going to be the same for kind of skilled forwards, danglers, and goal scorers. Like this is going to be another way that players find in order to maximize their opportunities to score goals. That's the thing with NHL coaches is as the era of like keep it simple, good old Canadian hockey, like as that school of thought collapses onto itself and dies like a neutron star, like we're gonna see more of the like if it works, it works type of coaching. And I think that's gonna be so good for the game. Like any coach that looks at the Michigan and goes, "I don't like the way you scored that goal." Like that's a goal. No complaints. Stop. Like that's it, right?
And it looked
So
awesome. Like, oh no, how dare you make awesome play? Like,
yeah.
if in soccer or football, sorry, if in
Mhm.
football you score a goal from like 30 yards out, and it's just like an absolute bomb, and usually when you attempt that shot, it just goes way over the bar or right into the keeper's mitts. It's a wasted opportunity. You're wasting possession. If it
Yeah.
goes in and your coach is like yelling at you about it, it's like, what do you mean? It went in. It
Yeah,
went into the
exactly.
net, right? It worked. And
Exactly.
in hockey, there's more of a philosophical discussion about like the morality behind even attempting like style point type of goals.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say to that is if you're scoring from 30 yards, like you're not maximizing an area of the field
No,
that's not really utilized. Like if you're going behind the net and scoring a Michigan, like you're maximizing the space you have to score goals on the ice. Like it's an
yeah,
actual tactical advantage to have a player who can do the Michigan. Like it shifts
certainly. Oh
everything.
my god, for
And I
sure.
think I think it would be funny for the future of NHL. Like one rule I would change in the NHL is I would like to see or I would like to see players be allowed to lift the back of the net and make a play through it. Like not necessarily bank it off the goalie
That's
and in,
so boring.
but
That's
like
so
imagine if you
boring.
could just lift the
No.
back of the net and make a
Oh,
pass. Like I think that would be
God.
great. Like
I thought you were
you
gonna say
know?
like the trapezoid rule or something. I want to see a goaltender be allowed to move anywhere on the ice where he pleases. I want it to be legal for a goaltender to carry the puck up the ice, cross the
Yeah,
center line, and gain the zone with control.
that I agree with.
Because
But removing the trapezoid, I think
good,
removing the trapezoid is how you get like 10 years of 2-1 hockey games in in New Jersey. Like that's how you get full on trap hockey. and I'm not a fan of that. But yeah, no, it's
I just love when goalies are far from their nets. I think it's really fun, and I
it's like a
don't
fish out
like
of
that
water.
the NHL tries to stop that because I think it's entertaining. And
Yeah.
the more you can get Steve Dangle to yell about goalies, the better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But there are things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports. And make sure to tune in for our World Juniors coverage as that starts very, very soon. We'll have some recaps for you, some breakdowns of the games, all that coming up as the weeks go on. This has been Haddock Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.